Hi, I'm Ralph Preston, and welcome to our Tuesday Stroke Buddies Stroke Survivors Support Group meeting. That's a mouthful. Today, Craig Williams is joining us. Craig's a friend of mine, a new friend of mine. I admire what he's doing a lot, and I wanted him to come here and tell you a little bit about what he's been doing for the last 5 years, and maybe we're going to touch a little bit on um, what we hope to do with his idea in terms of expanding it. So, Craig, why don't you tell us a little bit about your stroke and your recovery, and then go into how that led you to the stroke ambassador work that you do in visiting survivors in the hospital.
Great. Thank you, Ralph. Appreciate it. Well, good morning to everybody. I'm coming to you from Katy, Texas, which is a suburb of Houston. It's about 70 degrees here, so it's nice and warm today. And just thank you for allowing me to speak with you this morning. So my story starts back in 2015. I was working at a local hospital here in a children's hospital as a manager of facilities operations, sitting at my computer, working that morning, and the words on the screen just didn't make sense to me anymore. And so I got up, did a print screen, went out to my reception area where my secretary was to get a copy of it off the printer. And as I was walking out to the printer, I just started drifting off to the right, and I ran right into her desk. And she looked at me, she goes, Mr. Craig, what are you doing? And I said, well, I'm trying to find the printer. Well, I got my copy, came back to my office, looked at the screen and looked at my paper, and they were exactly the same, which was just a bunch of jibber jabber. I couldn't understand, couldn't read any of the words. So I knew I was in trouble right then and there. I'm an engineer by trade, and so something wasn't working right for me. And so I called my daughter, Katie, that worked pretty close by, within 10 minutes. I just said, Katie, help me. And that's all I said. And she goes, Dad, I'll be right there. She came pick me up, and because they wouldn't take care of me at a hospital where they only serve children. Isn't that weird? So they wouldn't take me to the ER or anything. They said, no, we got to take you to an adult hospital. So my daughter picked me up, took me down to Memorial Herman Katy Hospital, and I became a patient there. They did some tests on me that morning and found that I had had a stroke. And so they started treating me. I was a diabetic too, which means I wasn't on insulin, but I was taking medicines for it, but I hadn't been taking my medicines for some time. I just thought, I'm okay, I can handle this. And so if you know what a blood sugar or glucose number is, should be around 110, maybe at the most, and everything with that reasonably. Mine was 485 that morning when they took it in the hospital ER. A1C, which is a 90-day evaluation, or a number of your blood sugar over 90 days, should be around
6 or 7.
6 or 7. Mine was 1153. So I was not doing good. Wasn't taking care of my medicines, and so I had what they called a brainstem stroke. And if you haven't heard of that before, 98% of people that have a brainstem stroke die from them. There's only 2%. Well, I'm here to tell you I'm the 2%, one of the 2%. Took me 4 days to really get my wits about me again to a certain degree. But with a brainstem stroke, basically you use all functionality of your body for a while. And I couldn't, I had no cognitive reasoning power. My daughters were there with me, and I tried to talk to them, and I couldn't remember the words I was saying to them. And typical type of stroke issues where you just, everything is confusing. You're just can't talk or do anything. My doctor came into the room, my neurologist came in the room, and he said, so Mr. Williams, and I looked up at him, he goes, so we're going to put you on disability. We're taking all this stuff. You'll never have to work again. And because his brain scan that he looked showed I had no brain activity anymore, that the blood sugar had melted the neurons in the back of my brain to a point where I shouldn't be able to do anything. And so I looked at him and I said, well, why are you doing that? And he goes, wait a minute, you can actually talk to me? And I said, well, yeah. And he said, well, you shouldn't be able to. And my daughters looked over him and said, well, he's not going to like that at all, doctor. So So anyway, he did an examination and he said, the words he used for me, and I use this in my presentation with patients all the time, is he says, Craig, you've dodged a bullet because you shouldn't be able to do anything anymore. And I decided not to call it a bullet. I decided to call it just God's will in my life, that he had something else planned for me to do besides being a vegetable for the rest of my life. So took 4 days for me to finally get all my levels right where they would let me go home. I went home and started recovering. And as you can imagine, it takes a while to recover from a stroke, but a brainstem stroke, a little bit more difficulty in some areas. 6 months later, in November, I had another stroke. I had a right side ischemic stroke that affected my left side. Again, it was because, not because of my diabetes, because I had that under control, but they didn't have my blood thinned out enough. And so it caused another problem with my brain and caused the right side stroke, or ischemic stroke on the right side. Left side, I couldn't walk very good with my left side. I couldn't use my left hand hardly at all. Speech was somewhat diminished, but not as much as the brainstem stroke. So after I got where I could actually walk and talk and do what I wanted, I went back to the hospital to work, and I worked another 6 months. And then the ER department, whenever they come to your office, it's never a good thing. Okay. So the ER department said, Craig, we need to talk to you. They took me to an office. They said, you just can't do this job anymore. So we're going to ask you to resign, or else we're going to have to terminate you. And so I said, I'll resign. I knew I couldn't do the job anymore, but I was just trying to fool myself into being able to stay there. So I resigned, and then I started thinking, what am I going to do with my life now? Because I'm 62 years old, and I just don't have anything to do anymore. And so I woke up in the middle of the night, and I was dreaming about something. But what came to my mind is, you need to volunteer. And so the next morning, I called the volunteer services at the hospital, Memorial Herman Katie Hospital. And I talked to the director, and I said, so I'd like to come in and help out as a volunteer, but in a specific area. I said, when I was in a hospital going through my strokes, they were very good with the medical side of what they did for me, but the emotional side, I had nothing. Nobody talked to me about how I was feeling. Nobody talked to me about what was going through my brain in terms of emotions. And I said, and I think I have a pretty good perspective on that now, having had 2 strokes. And so I'd like to start a program there to where I can go interact with patients and their family members. And the director looked at me and she said, we don't have a program like that. And I said, well, I want to start one. And so the manager for stroke support, which I was going to their monthly meetings for about 3 or 4 months. So I met him and talked with him, and I asked him if he needed some help, and he just looked at me like, are you crazy? Yeah, I can use some help. And so anyway, I went to volunteers, and that was the only way I was going to be able to work in the hospital, is working through the volunteer organization. So the director agreed that she would help me, and the manager of stroke support put together a request for a position. So we sat down, we put an actual position description together with actual duties that I was going to have to do. And we talked in length about what our goal and objectives were for helping stroke patients and their caregivers. Because to me, having survived 2 strokes and had my daughters, they had to struggle with helping me, I just felt like there's got to be something that we can share with survivors as well, and their caregivers, to help them understand that there's something we can do, and something we can help them do to help their family members. So we put this program together, and I've worked in healthcare for over 30 years. So nothing happens fast in healthcare. If you put in a request for something, that request, regardless of what it is, usually takes anywhere from 3 to 8 weeks to happen. That's just the way it is. Well, we put in a request for a position description for a volunteer to help go by and see patients. And the actual job description got approved in 2 weeks. And so we were doing a happy dance all over the place because we were able to get the description approved. Then we had to go through through risk management and through the legal people at the hospital. They all had to read it. Then again through administration and then nursing administration. I'm going to be visiting their patients at the bedside. So we had to develop a script that I could use when I walked in the room to identify me as not a doctor, not a nurse, but a volunteer. And so it was really simple for me to do. I'd walk in the room and I'd look at this patient that was just, I have flashbacks to when I had my strokes, and they would just be out of sorts. And some of them could talk to me, some of them could focus with me, some of them couldn't. And then their family members were just absolutely disconnected because there was just not, they didn't know what they could do to help their loved one. So I'd walk in the room and I'd say, my name is Craig Williams. I'm not a doctor. I'm a volunteer, but I've been in that bed twice in the last 2 years as a stroke patient. And all of a sudden I'm their best friend because I have something I can share with them that's going to help them understand more about what's going on with their stroke right there. And so most of the time, the family members would have the little round stool. They'd push it over to me as they sit next to my dad or sit next to my mom. And then they would move over into the recliner and we'd all just sit there right in front of the patient and start talking about things. And one of the first things in our program that I really understood that made a big difference was talking to the patient and asking them questions and walking around the room as I'm talking and seeing how they can follow me around the room. And as I asked the questions, getting clear and concise answers or whatever they had based on their stroke, whatever they could do. And so I would do that. I'd walk around and talk to them, and it would help me to understand where they were in post-stroke a day or so after. So I usually go see the patients right after their stroke. And so we've developed a criteria for that. And in the stroke support manager, we actually sat down and we said, what would we want to look for in the criteria for a stroke patient survivor? And so we started thinking about, well, when they came in, what was their blood pressure and what is it now? If they had a blockage for some reason, did they go and have an MRI or a CT scan, or did they see a cardiologist about a blockage of an artery that has caused a stroke? So I would sit down with this nurse manager, and we would go over each patient's medical forms. Now, I didn't look at it, he looked at it, but I could ask him questions. We developed a score sheet for what the patient was going through, how they were doing right then. And so we had a good idea. I had a good idea of what I was going to be walking into when I went into the room. And that's a very important thing, because if you go in there blind, it's just terrible, not only for you, but it's for the patient and their family member. So when I went in, I felt like I was really armed to be able to share stuff with them, but not as a doctor, but as a volunteer. If they ask me any questions about patient care or about nursing care, I refer them back to the nurse or their doctor. I just tell them again, I'm Craig, I'm not a doctor. So that was one of the things on my criteria for the job description, that anything that was related to medical had to go back to the medical staff. And so the manager of stroke support would just sit down with me for about 15 minutes with each patient, and we would go over all this criteria. I write down my notes, and then we'd call the nurse that's in charge of that patient that day, and we would call them, and we would do a conference with them and ask them how they're doing today. Is there any things we need to know? Are they a candidate for us to go and sit at the bedside and talk to them? And sometimes it was no. They're so confused, and their family is all upset, so it wouldn't be a good thing. And other times it was, when can you get here? Because these people are really hungry to hear about their feelings. And the nurses, they know about feelings, but they weren't in the bed like I've been in bed. So I have credibility immediately with them when I go into the room. So that's what we started doing. I have my little cheat sheet with my notes on it, and we would get approval from the nurse to go in there. And then I'd go we have 7 different nursing units that we have the potential for having stroke patients. And so we go to those different areas. We sit down. I talk with the nurse before I go in again to make sure there's not something that's happened since the time we talked to them in the morning to the time we get there in the afternoon. Talk with them again. They say, oh yeah, it's fine. They're doing fine. Go in there. And so then I go in, and like I said, I introduce myself as a volunteer, but I've been in that bed before twice as a patient. And it just really is, it's an inviting effort from the patient and their family members, just because they just want to know more about, how's my dad going to get over this? What are we going to do? And they even ask me questions like, so how am I going to work and still take care of my mom and my dad now because they've had a stroke? And I can't answer that question. All I can tell them is, man, there's a lot of resources that you can look at through the hospital that can help you and look into those things. But I'm a volunteer that really has more specific knowledge about strokes. And so most of my meetings last anywhere from 15 to 20 minutes long with a patient, except if they speak a foreign language that I don't, and I don't speak a lot of languages. They'll usually have a family member that can translate for me, and so I'll speak in English to the family member, and they'll translate it. So that type of a visit will take anywhere from 30 to 45 minutes, but still, it's time well spent because the patient in their own language is hearing what I'm telling them in English through their loved one, and it's a great connection that I have through that family member. And they ask a lot of good questions too. So the patient just wants to know when they're going home, right? I mean, that's the first question they ask me. I said, I'm not a doctor. I said, mine took 4 days the first time. They said, well, did you have when you were in here, did you have was your brain do you have a lot of headaches? I said, oh yeah, I had headaches for 10 days. They said, 10 days? I said, this is me. This is my story. Yeah, as Craig, I had because it was a brainstem stroke. I had headaches for 10 days and they finally went away. The day that my headaches went away, I called my doctor and I talked to his nurse and she goes, wait a minute, Dr. Ron's been waiting for this call from you. And he picked up the phone. I said, hey, my brain's not hurting anymore. And he just started laughing. He says, Craig, that's really good news. And I said, well, because it had been hurting for a long time. So I share those kind of anecdotes with the patients just to help them understand that there's going to be things that are going to work. Things that are not. My muscles in my legs hurt tremendously. I had to take ibuprofen a lot, and I couldn't get over that for almost a month and a half. So people have different symptoms. That was my two that really bothered me. And being able to walk, when I finished doing physical therapy and ran out of money to do physical therapy, I started trying to do it on my own. And so I lived in an apartment, so I had a swimming pool, and I would get in the swimming pool, which is about chest high, and I'd walk it back and forth about 70 feet across the pool. And I'd forget how many laps I'd done because your brain just doesn't work anymore like it used to work. And so I went to a like a dollar store, and I bought some Ninja Turtles that were different colors, and I put them at the end of the pool. And I had a little Tupperware bowl that I sat there. And so every time I'd make a lap, I would take one of those Ninja Turtles and put it in the bowl. So I knew how many laps I was doing that way. And so that gave me encouragement, which gave my spirits an uplift and allowed me to understand that there is life after stroke. You just got to take it a little bit at a time, and just walking in the pool and counting for my steps was a big important thing for me. And I share that with the stroke patients because they need to come up with their own ideas of what they're going to do, because they're not going to be able to stay in rehab forever. So they're going to have to come up with a way to be able to help themselves get better. And I get a lot of questions from survivors saying, how can we help our dad? And I said, well, I played video games on computer. When I first had the stroke, I was an expert at playing a couple of games, and then after I had the stroke, I couldn't even find the icon for the game anymore. And so it took a while to get back to that. So it took me about 6 or 7 months to get back to where I was an expert. But those things were like, those kind of scratched my brain, so to speak, and helped me feel like I was progressing, because I used to play at the expert level, and now I was back at the beginner level. So I share that again with the patients to give them an idea of maybe something that they could find to try and help get their brain to get more active. So one of the things we do, I'm able to do with the stroke support person is we interact with a neurologist of the hospital. There's 4 of them in our hospital that they go by the bedside and talk to the patients after they've had a stroke, and they identify if they had a stroke. And so a lot of times those neurologists will call the manager that I work with and say, make sure you get Craig to go to room 720, because they're just really having a hard time with understanding what physical therapy that could help them, possibly help them get better. And so since I'd gone through physical therapy, I wasn't trying to sell it, but I just go in and the family would ask me, well, what do you know about physical therapy? I said, well, I know some about it because I went through it. And can you tell us? I said, well, all I can tell you is that the therapists that are doing that job are specifically trained for stroke survivors, and they know exactly, based on the doctor's recommendation, they know exactly what needs to happen. And so if you have that ability to get that kind of care for your loved one, I can't see why you wouldn't want to do that. I went through it for a period of time and then was able to go on my own and do physical. So there was one woman I was talking to, her husband was just adamant that he didn't want to spend the money to send her to rehab because he didn't think it was going to be worth it. And so I shared my heart with him about what it did for me. And so he called back, the neurologist called back to our office later that afternoon and said, I just signed the papers for her to go to rehab. So that made a difference in that patient's life, because it wasn't just a doctor telling them or a nurse telling them, it's somebody that had experience in that before. And I think that's where we connect the most in this work that I'm doing, is that our direct contact with the patient is so important. So I told you about walking into the room and seeing the person, talking to them and everything. And so since I'm an engineer, or was an engineer by trade, I use a number system. I started using it kind of infrequently at first, but now I use it on every patient. And by the way, in the last 5 years that I've been doing this, we've seen over 500 patients and family members. So it's been a great program that's really had some good success. But when I walk in the room and I look at the patient, I ask them the questions, I can tell really quickly. When I was a stroke patient with my brainstem stroke, if I had to give myself a number, I would have given myself a 50, because I just couldn't remember stuff very well. I could watch TV and I couldn't tell you what I was watching. My daughters would talk to me, I couldn't remember what they were saying to me. So functionality wise, I just really wasn't doing very well. So I'd give myself a 50. When I go in there to the patient room now, I compare where I was before to where they are now. And in most cases, the patients are much better off than I was. But there's some of them that were much worse than I was too. So if the number that I look at, and based on their abilities to communicate with me, is below 50, I'm not going to even do a number with them. But most of them are 65 to 80% better. So I'll tell them, this is not a doctor's number, and this is not your nurse's number. This is Craig's number that I'm going to give you because of my being able to talk to you and you being able to respond back to me. And so I remember one patient about 2 or 3 months ago, I went into his room and was talking with him, and I said, so if I had to give you a number based on our conversations, I give you a 75. And he almost jumped out of his bed. He was so excited that he had a 75. Craig gave him a 75. And I said, I had to tell him, no, that's Craig's number. That's not a doctor's number. But based on where I was and where you are right now, you're really functioning at a pretty good level post 2-day stroke. And so I said, what that tells me is you're going to have a lot of success as long as you apply yourself to those things and work hard. And so the next thing is, how do we do that? And so there's 3 things that I share with the patient, every patient that can listen. And if they can't, I'll share it with their family members and ask their family members to repeat it back to them right there in the room in front of me. So the first one is, your medications are going to change because you've had a stroke. So you're going to have to go out and get new prescriptions and take the medication. And I look at the family members when I'm looking at the patient. So I said, so you need to fill those medication prescriptions and let him start taking, or let her start taking them immediately when they get home, because that's going to be a game changer for your loved one. So medications. The second one is, your doctor's going to ask to see you in a couple of weeks. And a lot of people have the mindset, well, they're just getting my insurance benefits or my Medicare benefits. They're just padding their bills with that, but it's not the truth. The doctor's seen you at your worst when you had your stroke. And so in 2 weeks, I keep telling them, you're going to be a different person in 2 weeks. And the doctor needs to see that, evaluate that, and give you the encouragement from the medical side that this is progress that's happening now, and you're really on a right track to getting better. And then the third one, which is the hardest one for me to share with them, is lifestyle change. most of us are in that kind of position, having a stroke because of a lifestyle change that we weren't doing very well with. Mine was, I was a diabetic too, but I was working at a hospital from 6 in the morning till 9 at night. And so I was never ever eating right. I was always eating just fast food. I even hated to say the word spinach, let alone eat it at that time. But now I eat it on everything. So I changed my lifestyle completely. I went from a 265-pound man with a 42-inch waist to a 202-pound man with a 36-inch waist, and I've maintained that for 5 years now. So yeah, I truly made a lifestyle change, and I can share that with patients to help them and encourage them, because it did make a difference. You know, I eat cool stuff. My favorite tool to use in a kitchen is an air fryer. I love an air fryer. They're the best tool that God ever created. So I talked to them about their lifestyle changes, and immediately I'll get from the spouse, I'll get this, like, see what I told you? See, Mr. Craig is telling you the same thing I've been trying to tell you for 3 years or whatever, you know. And so I said, listen, I don't want to cause a fight or anything, but I said, I can give you proof that by making that lifestyle change to myself, it made a major difference in my life, in my quality of life, in my life with my family. I have 2 daughters. And so I said, it just was the right thing to do. And then I opened it up to questions for them. And the questions are all over the board. They're just wanting to know when they're going to get out there, or what they're going to do now. Are they going to be able to go back to work? I said, man, those are questions for your doctor, not for me. But I'm telling you that if you're really truly wanting to get better, you can do it. I did it. If I can do it, you can do it. And that's what my goal to share with them at the end of it is this is not rocket science, but it's common sense. You did wrong, and it caused you to have a stroke. And now you can do right and have a really, really good life, and be productive. Most of you will go back to work, which is a really cool thing. I was 62, so I took an early retirement, and then applied for medical disability and got that. So I'm just I'm working as a volunteer now, full time. I actually work 2 days a week, Tuesdays and Thursdays. I work about 5 hours both days. When I walk into the manager's office in the morning, we'll sit down and we'll discuss the patients, and then I go see them after lunch, and then I'm gone by 2 o'clock in the afternoon on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And then the manager I work with, he does informational packets for stroke patients and heart attack patients. And so as an ancillary duty, I actually make those stroke folders for him, so that we can hand them out to the patients when they have their stroke. And it has all kinds of literature and websites that they can contact to learn more about the stroke that they've had, and how they can start to rehabilitate themselves from that. So so what I wanted to share with you also is, because I've been doing this with patients for a long time, I've noticed some characteristics of patients that I think are really important. And I'm sure if you've been in the stroke community for a while, you're gonna understand what these are. But I think it's important that I share them with you, because these are things I've observed from patients, and they're really kind of telltale signs that I have if a patient is, after 2 days of a stroke or 3 days of a stroke, if they're even starting to get it, or if they're still just disconnected from everything. So I have my 5 Fs, F is in Frank, and I have my 5 Ds, D is in David. So I'm going to share those with you right now. So the 5 Fs, and they're not in any particular order, but they're all negative things that stroke patients go through, and to a certain extent, so do their survivors as well. Okay. So the first one is failure. The stroke patient feels immediately that they have failed, not only themselves, but their family, because they're laying in this bed and can't virtually do anything at the time. Second one is forgetting. It's a common thing for stroke patients to go through, just forgetting words, forgetting names, forgetting comments. And so that's the second one. Next one is feelings. It's a really big one, because your feelings are changing, and you'd like to tell your family about it, but you know what? You're so embarrassed by it that you just can't tell them. So there's a disconnect between you and your loved ones because you're not willing to share your feelings. One of the words I use, that's not an F word, but it's transparency. That's what I went through with my daughters. They said, Dad, if we're going to help you get better, you're going to have to tell us about everything. And as the dad of these two girls all their lives, it was the hardest thing for me to do, to tell them that I couldn't do some things anymore that I used to do. So transparency was a part of that in your feeling. The next one is forgiveness. Just accepting forgiveness from somebody and giving forgiveness to people in your family. Very difficult for a stroke patient because their emotions are all over the board, and forgiveness just is absolutely a tough thing for them to grasp and to give or to get, so to speak. And then the future. The future is so bleak for so many stroke patients because they have no idea where they're going and what they're going to do. And that's what's so cool about our program. When we come in and talk to them, we have a purpose for coming in and talk to them. It's not just to say, hey, how you doing, everything, but my goal is to give them hope where there is none, and to give their family members that are sitting by the bedside hope that Craig went through this. It took me 2 years to go through it, but I got okay. My neurologist says I'm at 98% back after having had 2 strokes. And the only deficit I have is my left hand. I can't put a set of keys in my left hand and put them in a door lock and turn it. My hand just won't turn with keys in it. So my doctor said, Craig, if that's the only thing that's messed up with you after having 2 strokes, he said, I'm very happy with that. So the next one is the D's, okay? The first D is depression. Most stroke survivors go into a spiraling depression because their world as they knew it before is no longer there. And they don't know what their world's going to be. They have no clue where they're going, how they're going to get there, and what the end result is going to be for them. So depression is a major issue. The other one is just being devastated because you're not going to be able to do your job. In some cases, not going to be able to do your job anymore. You're not going to be able to communicate with your family like you did before. As I sit there talking to the stroke patient, I'd say, okay, Ralph, this is how you feel right now. And I would tell them like 5 or 6 things how they were feeling, and they would just look at me and thought I was reading their mind. But what I was doing was telling them I had the same feelings before too. And they couldn't even talk to their family, but they would look at their family and they'd point to me, shake their head and point to their family and shake their head going, he's telling you the right things. He's telling you the truth. That's what I'm going through. So you act as almost like a little connector for the stroke patient to the family. Let's see, devastation, disconnected. The next one is deception. Oh my goodness. For stroke patients, we're trying to deceive our family. We love our family, but we don't want them to know what we're going through because a lot of that's really, it's tough to handle. And we as stroke patients can't handle it very well, but we think our family is, if we don't deceive them, they're going to find out what's really going on, and we're going to hurt them. We're going to ruin their lives, or we're going to make it more difficult for them to help us in the future. It's a big no-no. And then the last one for stroke patients is disappointment. When you've had a stroke, you feel like you have disappointed everybody. And I'm not talking just your immediate family, but I'm talking your co-workers. I'm talking about the doctors that are taking care of you, the nurses that are taking care of you. You've disappointed them, and you feel such a negative feeling about that. And the only way you can get over that is to pull yourself up by your bootstraps and quit having pity parties and move on with your life. And that brings me to another subject, pity party. So when I walk into the room, I look at the patient, I can ask them those questions, and very quickly I can tell one of 2 things. The patient is going to be, woe is me, I've had a stroke, and I'm never ever going to be able to do anything about it, and I'm just going to, just muddle along. And then there's the person that says, I'm going to kick this thing's butt so hard, I'm going to get my life back much better than it was before, and I'm going to be an example for people down the road. And I'd say 80% of the people I talk with are that number 2. They just absolutely are determined to get their lives back. And when I ask them about that in front of their families, a lot of their families will tell me the same thing. Oh no, he or she's a 2, because she really is strong-willed, and she'll get back from that. And that's just another way for me to help the family unite and work towards a common goal of getting back from the stroke and getting on with their lives. Let's see what I have else. You know what? I've only been talking.
Excuse me, Craig.
Yes.
I think I missed a D.
Okay.
I have depression, devastation, deception, disappointment.
Okay, I thought I left one out. I appreciate you asking me. It's disconnected. So you feel
You mentioned that very briefly.
Yeah, so disconnected from everything. I mean, most of people that before they had their stroke, they were just in charge and connected to everything and doing everything so well. And now there's this disconnect because nothing seems to make sense to you anymore after you got a stroke.
Part of it's the feeling, I think.
Yeah, exactly. So I've been going for about 40 minutes. Does anybody have any questions or any comments? I've done this a couple of times now, so it's exciting to me to be able to share it with you, because can you see the opportunities that we have across our country to go into hospitals as a volunteer or whatever way you need to go in and be able to share this program? We have nurses that come to our hospital that are travelers because of COVID and everything, and people just bouncing around. And nurses come in, and I try and go into their huddles and talk to them about our program. And when I tell them what we're doing in terms of the patient bedside, talking to the patient and the family member, they just look at me and they go, "How come I've never heard of this before?" And I said, "Well, because we just started here at Memorial Herman Katie about 5 years ago, because I wanted to do something to help stroke patients, and I felt like this is a good thing." And we've had the buy-in from the hospital completely. We have our anniversary on April of this year. They're doing a celebration for the entire stroke program, and they're going to have cookie and punch and cake and everything. And so we're excited about that, because they're telling us, the administration is telling us, this is an important program to the success of our hospital, and so we want to celebrate that.
I don't know if anybody out there, I've done some stroke work through hospitals, and I run into the HIPAA wall every time I try and do anything. I've had hospitals that would let me hold stroke survivors support group meetings in their conference room, but they wouldn't let us hand out a flyer about the meetings to the stroke patients. They wouldn't let us hang one in the rehab room or anything. So one of the things that a lot of people watching this might not realize is that what Craig's done here is just short of a miracle in terms of the healthcare system. No, really, Craig, you're laughing, but it's true. You know it's true, because
I've lived
like
it. I've lived
it takes 8 weeks to do anything, and they approved it in 2 weeks. So when I finish this, I'm going to ask you to tell them about the board member's wife. So
okay.
So this is a very difficult thing. Lauren Seidel, who from Med Rhythms, introduced Craig and I, and when she did, she thought that we had a lot in common, and most certainly we do. And you know, I didn't start this Craig's specific idea, but I like it a lot. And if you think about it, if you read, you know, my definition of what a stroke buddy is, you know, Craig's living it in a, you know, fairly specific way. And I think one of the things that you do, Craig, is you put a face on stroke. You put some humanity to it. You're a person. You're a real person. The doctors and nurses and everything, they come and go, and you're all disoriented in that bed, and you know, it's like they're just buzzing around you. It's like there's no connection to people, and I very much felt that in the rehab hospital I went to Tuesday and Thursday stroke group meetings. I very much felt when other survivors came in that it was a real plus. In fact, I ended up going back. It infected me so much, I ended up going back to those meetings myself, because I wanted to be the one to walk in the room, because when somebody walked in the room when I was sitting in the wheelchair, it meant a lot to me. It meant, okay, there's hope. So not only you mentioned hope, but not only you're providing hope, but you're putting a face with it and some humanity to the whole thing. And it's just remarkable. One of the things that we're talking about doing is trying to roll this out. And, you know, anybody could go start this in their local hospital. However, they're going to go through the whole hospital thing. And so one of our ideas is to, Craig's already done this, and they've gotten it approved by the hospital. So there's already a methodology in place, and one of the things that we're hoping to do is bring that methodology, make a kit out of it, if you will. And then we'd be able to recruit, for lack of a better term, stroke ambassadors, and give them the tools they need to deal with the hospital. I'm going to let Craig tell the board member's story, but I'll preface it with, once the hospitals realize how this works, and they're real competitive with each other, and I think, Craig, we can use this to our advantage in terms of trying to roll this out. You know, because one hospital will become a stroke center, and every hospital in that city will become a certified stroke center to compete with them. And I always think this is funny because, like, you don't get to pick a stroke center. It's not like picking a day spa or something. You know, they take you to the closest place when you have a stroke. But anyway, I think we can use that to our advantage, and I think the hospitals will recognize this. We've already, through MedRhythms, Craig and I brought a hospital system in Florida into the party, and one of the things we're hoping to do would be, they're about to implement this thing with Craig's help. Thank you very much, Craig. And I know Sam is more than appreciative of that help. And I'm just thinking, I'm a video professional, so if I can go to Texas and go to Florida and show the work that Craig has been doing and the work that Art is about to do, or it will have started by the time I get there for the Halifax system, that we can put together something that will speak to hospitals. Because this is a tremendous amount of work that he did in order to set this up. And hospitals are like, they put up barriers in my experience. So I'll shut up now and let you tell them about the board member's wife, because that kind of brings the whole thing home for me.
So does anybody else have any questions or any comments about what I've shared with you today? Because I'm really interested in getting feedback, positive, negative, or, you know, yes.
Oh, hi, Craig.
Hi.
I'm honored to meet you in this space. I live in Austin. I lived in Katy for a couple of years, and
We're neighbors.
yes, we are. I've seen you, I believe, on the stroke survivor group. You look very familiar.
Oh, thank you.
I
I actually am a spokesperson for the American Stroke Association. I've done videos for their webpage before too, so you may have seen me there.
Yes, I just watched one this morning, actually.
I put them in the promotional stuff, Craig.
Oh, good. Thank you. Yeah. Go ahead.
That's my job. I'm supposed to spread the word. Go ahead, Beth. Sorry.
So I am extremely interested in supporting stroke survivors emotionally after stroke. I totally agree with what you said, that the emotional support wasn't there. There was all the physical therapy and the tests and the doctors and blah, 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 but no emotional support. I actually got a little teary when you're saying that, because it mirrored my own experience so perfectly. And in 2020, I went on to get a mental health peer specialist certificate to help me in this. And I was trying to work with another program, the Stroke Survivor to Survivor program. I'm getting started in an Austin hospital, but HIPAA came up and the conversation just never went anywhere. My life got tough. I didn't pursue it. But you coming on here with this is my kick in the rear to get started again. So I would very much like to talk to you more about this, find out more about this. And you just seem like a nice guy. So
I am a nice guy.
Yeah.
Well, good. I'm glad.
Yeah, so I think
That's
what you've done is absolutely amazing. Hats off to you. And, you know, like I said, I want to get involved.
Yeah.
great. One of the things that we're trying to do is Craig has asked the hospital to get permission to share the materials that he's developed, because if you ran into some of these problems with hospitals, they're very difficult to work with, particularly with patients, because of the whole thing with HIPAA and sharing personal information and all that. And so one of the things that we're hoping to do is put together from Craig's work, from a kind of a template that anyone can use to go to their hospital system. And of course, one thing that we need, any kind of group or cause needs some champions. So one of the things that we'll need is some champions like Craig, and hopefully we're making one with Art in Florida, and you can become one that can, help guide other people through this whole thing. I think this ought to be in not every hospital in the country, but it certainly ought to be in on a large number of the major hospitals in the country. And I think size doesn't matter. I think it's what it's going to come down to is finding enough stroke ambassadors. And I actually don't think that's going to be a problem, because there's a lot of interest in this. And when I started helping other stroke survivors, I thought, well, sort of like after you have a stroke, you think you're the only one, you know? Well, so I started helping stroke survivors, and for a little while, I thought I was the only one. Um, and then I found out that this is a very common feeling among people who survive a stroke. They want to make it easier on the next person. And I estimate there could be as much as 50% of the people want to do something to help other stroke survivors. We got a lot of numbers in this country. You know, the Stroke Buddies numbers are there are 8 million stroke survivors, and if and there are 800,000 people have a stroke. So if 1 in 10 stroke survivors would help somebody else, everybody in the country would have a stroke buddy. Well, that's also true of Craig's hospital system. We got a lot of people out there that have gone through this. If they have big hearts like you do, Beth, and they want to do something about it, then we're trying to make this easy so it can be something somebody can roll out without reinventing the wheel. Because I can't tell anybody, I can't impress on anybody how much work Craig had to do to get this going if they have not worked with a hospital system. I mean, I worked with 2 of them. The other hospital system brought in lawyers at $300 an hour. They paid lawyers to come in and tell us why we couldn't do what we wanted to do.
Yeah, 5 years ago, I had a full head of hair. Now I have none. Okay. And that's because I kept doing this. Now look, I kept going, I can't believe you guys are doing that to me again. That's how I lost all my hair. Okay. So no, but I want to be respectful of your time, and plus I got to get to work as a volunteer in a little bit because I got to go see patients. But I wanted to share with you the story that I shared with Ralph. And if any of you want to contact me, Ralph, have you got my business card? Maybe you could throw up or something like that.
Yeah, no, and I always put I'll put all your information and the video links and everything under the video and under the description on the video of this.
Right. So you guys feel free to call me or email me or text me even. I'm proficient in all those areas. But if you have any questions or just a comment or something like that, everything, even if it's not what I really like, I'm still going to appreciate having the comments from different people. But I was telling Ralph about this story. The COO of our hospital is fairly new, within 2 years. And so she's come in after the program has been in place for 3 years. And I actually just recently sat down with her in a Zoom meeting and did a history of the 5 years. And she was absolutely amazed at what we've been able to accomplish. You know, over 500 patients and caregivers that we've talked to in the 5 years. And that's face-to-face views, either talking to them in the patient room or I've been able to do Zoom meetings too with them. So I had my computer at home with the Zoom, and they put the patient advocacy put a iPad in front of their on a tripod in front of their patient bed, and I did 35 Zoom meetings during COVID. So it was really a cool way to connect with them. The administration asked me to do that because they saw the value that they were missing because we weren't able to come into the hospital for such a long time. So this COO, I was talking to her. She stopped me in the hallway one day. She said, "Craig, I need to tell you something." I said, "Okay." And she goes, "It's about a patient." And I went, "Oh man, I wonder what I did wrong." And so I said, "What? Okay." She goes, "No, this is not good, and this is not bad. This is good." And I said, "Oh, okay." So she said, "So you went and visited with a patient about 2.5 months ago, and when you walked in the room, you introduced yourself just like the criteria says, and they asked you to sit down. You talked with the lady, and you shared your program with them, and she said she really interacted with you a lot, that you made a lot of sense to her, and she was confused about a lot of things, but you had helped with the confusion, and her husband wasn't there at the time, but she just was really thankful for my visit." And I said, "Oh, okay." And she goes, "She's one of our board of directors' wives." And so I didn't know who she was. I knew her name, her first name, because my guy I work with gave me that, but I didn't know where she was from. I just, I treat everybody the same. And she said, the administrator said, "So you in our program got shared with a board member's wife, and now all the board members know about it, and they know how valuable that program is here at Memorial Hermann." Memorial Hermann Katy is only about a 200-bed hospital, so it's not a huge hospital in the scope of the medical industry, but it's in a geographic area where there's a lot of older people, so we get a lot of stroke patients. 2 weeks ago was the most I've ever had, at 11 stroke patients in one day, and that was just mind-boggling for me because we usually have maybe 2 to 5 a week, but in one day we had 11. So we're a target-rich environment for older people because our hospital is just in a perfect location to help the community out right there, and only a 200-bed hospital. So, and we have this stroke program that we're supporting them with that absolutely is making a difference in the lives of stroke patients and their caregivers or family members that are just absolutely devastated because of their loved one having a stroke. So anybody else have any comments or any questions I can help you with?
What are the requirements to join the board member?
The requirements.
I didn't hear that.
Oh, I'm sorry. What are the requirements to join the movement, or do you have a board?
Okay, so ours is a volunteer. We have a volunteer organization at our hospital, and that's the only way that I could get into a position where I could support and serve the way I do, and that's just simply the way we got involved with it here at Memorial Hermann Katy. So I became a volunteer. I have actually, and I'll just show you real quickly. I have an actual job description that I have. Has 8 different lines that I have to follow when I go into a stroke patient's room. The criteria is already set up. I even have a training section that my boss had to actually view me going into a stroke patient's room. The first time I did that with my manager, I walked in the room, introduced myself, sat down. I started talking to them, and their family members came over, and they just all got together and huddled around me. And I looked back at my manager, and he looked at me and goes, "You got this, Craig." And he just, I never saw him after that, because he knew that I had a heart for stroke patients because I've been one, and he knew that I was going to be able to help them. And that's the hardest thing about being a stroke support person in this job is there's a lot of work to it. It's not just a fanfare of going in and saying hi to the patient. When you do a lot of digging into the medical records with the support of the hospital to understand the dynamics, so that when you walk into that patient room, you have the confidence to be able to share with them how you feel and how they feel without compromising their medical status and their families. And sometimes it's what I would call brokenness, and you know what I'm talking about, where the family is just absolutely, beside themselves because mom and dad just are never going to be the same. And how do we even deal with that now? Because we're left to pick up the pieces after mom and dad or whatever, whoever it is, has had that stroke.
Doreen, I got your email and the notes that you left, and I'll send you some information. One of the things, and this may apply to you, Beth. I'll do the same thing with you through Facebook Messenger. I can find you.
I
Um,
actually, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I can send you my personal email because I no longer use the account we are talking on.
Oh, okay.
So I'll send it to you in the chat.
Okay. Okay. Well,
But go ahead.
I'll make sure to get it. Anyway, we're in the early stages of this idea. Craig and I got introduced to each other a couple months ago. I had this other hospital system that wanted to do it. We've talked with MedRhythms that we both kind of partner with about, and they're interested in helping us roll this idea out. Don't really know. So getting back to your question, Doreen, don't really know exactly what their commitment's going to be. Lauren was going to be in this meeting, but was in Morocco flying back to England, and her plane got delayed. So I got a text from her during the meeting saying she couldn't be here. Anyway, Craig and I would like to do this. Like I said, he's done a tremendous amount of background work, and what we're hoping to do is, put together some kind of a package that people can take to their local hospital and see if they can get this going. We could also, like I said, if I could go to Texas and Florida for a couple days and make a video about it, we'd have some kind of, marketing tools for people, stroke ambassadors, to say, here's a YouTube video about how the program works, and I'd like to do it here, and Craig's trying to get permission, and if we can't, we can regenerate them to have all the materials to get past the hospital boards and administration and everything. So we're trying to make this easy, but this is in the early stages, and Craig and Laura and I all felt like it was still a good idea to go public with it, bring it to everyone. But we don't have that structure set up. In fact, Doreen, if you and Beth and other people out there want to help with it, that's what it's going to take. I mean, I'm committed to it, and I'm pretty sure MedRhythms is, and well, we all know Craig is. 5 years and 500 patients. My God, I mean, if that isn't commitment, what is? So we're going to develop this. I actually made up a group called Stroke Ambassadors. Nobody's in it. We could start trying to find people to be stroke ambassadors, but it might be a little bit early because, like Doreen and Beth, if you express an interest, we still don't have all the answers. So I'll share that group with you. If, like I said, any kind of cause, any kind of group needs champions. If there's anybody who really likes this idea, wants to help us do it, we'd more than welcome your help. Right, Craig?
Yeah, what is encouraging to me is being able to get this out to a lot of people in a lot of places, and I really appreciate if you want to share this video with other people. I'd be happy to answer their questions they might have about it. But I just think that in numbers, the more that people see the video and understand the program it's not a real simple program. There's a lot of dynamics to it, but once you learn how to do it, it's a life-changing event for stroke survivors and their family members. It really is, because it gives them hope where there's hopelessness. And that's what I share is I try and give them a purpose in their life where they don't think they even have a purpose anymore. And so it's just by sheer repetition for me doing it for over 5 years now, it's like a second nature for me to go into a patient room and just sit down and talk with the folks and get their interactions and get their questions. And the last thing I do before I leave a room, there is a stroke patient. The manager I work with is giving me these little brains. It looks like a little brain, but it's a squeeze ball. and it has the name of the hospital on it, Memorial Herman Katy Hospital. And so I'll hand them the brain. And if I know what their deficit is, I'll always give it to the deficit side and try to have them take it from me. And it's just a little small brain that fits in the palm of your hand. And so I'll ask them if they'd like a gift from me, and they go, yeah. And so I'll hand them the gift and I'll put it in their deficit side. And most of the time they can pick it out. They can get it. Sometimes they say, well, I just can't do it, and I'll give it to the other hand. But I'll say there's one rule for you to get this gift from me. And they'll just look at me and they're so intent. And so their family members are so intent. And I say, you can't throw it at your husband, or you can't throw it at your wife. And they'll start laughing. A patient that's going through a stroke will start laughing with me. And that's the way I leave them when I leave the room, with a smile on their face and being happy. And that makes my day then, because I've been able to change their life for at least a small moment and help them feel good about themselves. And some of the patients will tell me, they'll hold it in their hand and go, it's not heavy enough. I said, okay. But anyway, I really appreciate your time today. I appreciate you spending some time with me and letting me share with you guys. And Ralph's going to put up my information. If anybody wants to connect with me by cell phone or by text or even by email, I'd be honored to answer any questions for you.
Well, thank you, Craig. And Beth, I did get your, I'll come back to thanking. I did get your email, and I'm going to go ahead and post like this meeting, anything I got in the group. There aren't any members right now because I haven't tried to promote it in any way. And but one thing I can do is put this meeting in there and put Craig's 2 videos, put his information there, also under the YouTube video. Like I said, Craig, it's my job to spread the word, so that's what I'll do.
Yeah.
You just keep doing what you're doing, and we'll try and see if we can't make this happen in bunches of hospitals. And so I want to really thank you for taking the time today. I also want to thank you for just being you, for putting a face and some humanity to a life-changing event for a lot of people. It's powerful stuff.
Yeah.
And, if we want to fundamentally change stroke recovery, this is a good way to start at the bedside on day 2. And we'll just take it from there right through physical therapy. I got a bunch of ideas about how they're not listening to us, but that's subject for many more meetings. So, Craig, thank you again so much. And thanks to the folks who joined us today, and thanks to everybody on YouTube for tuning in. I hope this turns out like a lot of some of the other videos. Craig have 400, 500, 800. Got a couple of them that are passing 1,000 views. So if we can get a couple thousand people to view this, and those videos that have 1,000 views are 4 or 5 months old.
Yeah.
So, if we can get a couple thousand people a year to view this, we can start spreading the word. The other thing is, if we form a group and we come together as a community and we start doing this in more hospitals, Sam in Halifax are going to jump into this.
Oh, yeah.
She's been here today if she could have. So, let's see if we can get the hospitals to line up in a queue for us.
Sounds perfect.
All right. Well, with that, I'm going to end it and thank everybody for coming.
Yeah, thanks, guys. See y'all later.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Craig.